Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. What is it? Tell me what it is. I want to bask in the glory of your
it was actually a little chilly today. I think it was only in the about 60s.
60.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It really, man, I tell you, it was. I pulled my coat around me a little bit and went, woo!
Oh, yeah. Snuggled right up. Yeah. Your sleeveless coat, otherwise known as a vest. I'll bet you're one of those. The few Phoenix vest wearers.
Yes. Vest and Speedos. That's all I wear.
We are The Next Reel, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We talk about movies and then spoil them heavily. And you can find us at thenextreel.com. You can read the blog stylings of the goodly Steve Sarmento. And you can see all of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that Andy and I have spent together over the last several years talking about movies in the regular Next Reel weekly show. So we encourage you to check that out. You can also find links to all of our social platforms, including the jumping over to Letterboxd to see our watch list for 2014. If you want to keep up with the movies that we're talking about when we talk about them, you can find the movies on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. And with that, I'd like to do a graceful toss to Andy for our weekly update on Andy versus the People, the Instagram Pony Prize Guess the Movie Challenge.
That's right. It was a good week. You know, it was a good challenge. I threw out the movie Holes, which I think is a fantastic kids film.
It is a fantastic kids film.
There were a lot of guesses. Lots of guesses. You've seen the movie. It kind of jumps back and forth between present day and flashbacks to kind of the Old West in that area. And so I was really specifically just picking Old West photos as opposed to any of the present day stuff, which I think is a little more obvious. And so there's lots of guesses, everything from Fistful of Dollars to The Outlaw Josie Wales, Man Called Horse, The Wild Bunch, City Slickers. You know, people were all over the map trying to get it. And finally, on the third image, Windy21 nailed it. And, you know, I was kind of surprised. I was hoping it would go a little longer, but I was thrilled that someone was able to figure it out after those few images. So congratulations, Windy21.
We love seeing lots of guesses, too. That's really
absolutely
fun. It's more fun when lots of people are trying it out. That's really cool. Windy21 entered to win the Pony Prize. Which, you know, it's looking more and more like Andy's just going to come to your house and hang out for a few hours. Maybe watch his favorite movie.
Maybe sing a new ringtone for you live.
A jaunty tune.
But I only know 3, so it's got to be one of those.
Excellent. Oh dear. You know, I feel like we would be remiss if we did not talk about. And this is here we are. We've been laughing, and this is a dour segue. Did you not feel completely kicked in the gut this week?
It really was horrible news about Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it was just one of those ones where it's particularly awkward initially because it was, oh my gosh, can you believe Philip Seymour Hoffman was found dead? And then people started posting, oh, this is one of those hoaxes. Here's the website.
Well, because I think it was just a hoax, a few days prior. It was a real hoax.
So people were really confused, and and people were like, no, I saw it in the New York Times, and then, you know, it seemed to take a good couple hours for the news to kind of straighten out that in fact it did happen. And just, you know, man, I don't know. I was really, really bummed out by that news. Not only because he's really, I think, one of the best actors that we have living or was living right now, but also because, I mean, you know, he leaves behind a family, and it's just, you know, it just is really hard.
It is really, really hard. And, in terms of the industry, I think he was a unique talent. And, you know, I have had conversations about, you know, specifically about Philip Seymour Hoffman, and just being really genuinely excited to age with him, because, and I know you aren't particularly a fan of the film, but I think his performance in Almost Famous and the late night phone conversation about Uncool.
What are you talking about? I love that movie. Yes.
Steve you do?
Hates it.
Who is it that doesn't? Oh, Steve.
Yeah,
he's
right.
the one. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad you love it, because that that sequence, I fell in love with Philip Seymour Hoffman a little bit in that movie. Like really, like that was a fantastic piece. I've seen every one of his films, and there just isn't a one that I can't find something not to love about his work. He was a fantastic talent and a great loss to the industry. But to your point, I think I'm just more aware with each passing day as I grow with my own family, just what an incredible loss that would be personally. So hearts go out to those grieving
absolutely.
Here. All right. And now on to the funny stuff. Let's talk about trailers.
Let's talk about mine first because it is so funny.
All right, kick it off. I dare you.
It actually is not funny. It is not funny.
Not another one of Malkovich's comedic roles.
I don't think so. This is Cesar Chavez, an American hero. This is the story of Cesar Chavez as he tries to get rights for all of the farm workers. And it looks like a great film. Yes, John Malkovich is in it as somebody who is looks like he's kind of trying to help Chavez and his fight. But Michael Pena plays Cesar Chavez. And I got to say, I've always loved Pena. And I think that, I don't know, there's something great about seeing him kind of carrying the film, you know? And I don't know. I'm really excited. It's got Pena in it. It's got Rosario Dawson, America Ferrera, and Malkovich, and it's directed by Diego Luna, which my understanding is this is his directorial debut. And I've always liked him since I've seen him acting in some of his earlier films, and the fact that he's kind of directing this really piques my curiosity, and I'm curious to see what he's going to do with this film.
I am curious about that too. I don't know much about it. The trailer looks really interesting, and I just want to highlight your point about Michael Pena. I was really surprised to see him in in this leading role. Right? I'm so used to seeing him as the other guy. He's a great other guy. I mean, he's been in big roles as another guy. But this role, to see him taking on such a pivotal figure of recent history is he really
does. Yeah,
it's very strong.
It's one of those films that looks like there's going to be some interesting stuff going on with it. It's a really interesting story. Definitely an interesting political thriller and biographical story. And I'm just curious to see how Diego Luna, of all people, kind of carries it as a film. I'm very curious about him as a director.
I forget. Did you ever see?
I
Gangster
didn't
Squad?
yet.
That's too bad. Navidad. You got to see it. Navidad.
I take.
He does a great job in the film. Yeah. But he's another guy.
I was going to say, I take it
ahead.
back. Diego Luna has directed another film called Abel back in 2010 about a peculiar young boy who, as he blurs reality and fantasy, takes over the responsibilities of a family man in his father's absence. So that is something that Luna has directed before, along with some segments in some other project. He did a documentary, and then he did a segment in another film. So, I mean, he has directed a few things, and actually he's produced a number of things, and then, of course, acted in just a heck of a lot of stuff. So, yeah, I'm really curious to see how this one turns out.
Excellent.
This one opens April 4th, 2014. Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, now
good
we can do yours. Yes, now
people should know
they should know that.
Okay, mine is a little bit bittersweet.
Is it bittersweet?
It is really bittersweet. I'm nervous about this one. Okay, first of all, I'm a big fan of the pulp fiction. I'm a big fan, and I don't mean the movie, although I'm also a fan of that. I'm a fan of literally these the kind of pulp crime novels, and Dean Koontz is one of those that he's my summertime kind of literature of choice. The empty calories kind of literature, great stories. They, move along quickly. They have, great, interesting heroes. And so I'm a fan of the Koontz. And my father-in-law, introduced me to this series, the Odd Thomas series. And he's got this just most unique central figure, this Odd Thomas. He's very odd, and he's call him Odd Thomas. And they made a movie out of it, Odd Thomas, the movie. It is, quote, a comedy horror mystery. And I guess that's fair. I mean, that's fair. There's more sort of thrills in the Dean Koontz kind of rendition of the original, the canonical Odd Thomas. But I get it. I was excited when I heard that this movie was being made, and I was very much looking forward to it. And I think it was supposed to be released in June or July of last year, and then it was shelved. It went silent. Dark, no trailer, no nothing, and the word was out that this film was going to join the list of films that were made and just were never released for some reason or another. Maybe there was a conflict of scheduling, maybe there was just a studio conflict, maybe there was some other legal thing going on, maybe it was just a crummy movie and they just decided that it wasn't worth it. But it has a new release date. Unfortunately, it's direct to digital, and that's what makes it, I think, bittersweet, right? This movie was shelved for months, and now it's going straight to iTunes. Is that the new kind of back catalog thing? And the problem with it is, I think it's an interesting film with interesting people. Anton Yelchin in it, the young Russian from who
Star Trek.
Star Trek, Chekhov. He also, he did that one with Justin Timberlake. Can't remember the name on that one. It was I lost it. Anyway, Anton Yelchin, Addison right? Timlin, Alpha Dog. That was a tough one to watch, but he has a great performance in that film. It is William Dafoe is in this film. It looks interesting, directed by Steven Summers. Steven Summers did, his name's on all the Mummy movies and the Scorpion King and Van Helsing, and he's got all the kind of, action cred. He's written a bunch of other things. He wrote the latest G.I. Joe. He's got those behind him. Those are very similar to my feeling about Dean Koontz. So, like, they're the empty calorie excitement kind of movies. You know what I mean? And I like those. I'm fine with those. But I just worry that this one's going to be, I don't know, less The Mummy and more Death Race 2000. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you got to worry about the Koontz movies anyway. When they get translated, it's not always the best. I mean, how many people remember the 1998 film Phantoms that was...
Yeah, no, I do, but not for the right reasons.
Oddly enough, Peter O'Toole was in that one.
I know. You see my point.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty terrible.
So I'm nervous about it. But you said, when you watched, you were interested.
My curiosity
too, right?
is incredibly piqued. I've never heard of the series. I've never read a Dean Koontz novel. My wife loves his books, but I just haven't sat down to read any of them. This one definitely has some very peculiar vibe, just in the concept of this world that has been created, that it definitely draws me in. It looks really, really unique.
Well, that was the thing about the books, too. Sometimes you get the feeling like, oh, my gosh, it took me a few chapters to get into the book and really figure out that I understood this world. And this one, it took me a full book to get into the series. Like it was to really sort of buy into his unique abilities, and I really quite like them. I think it's a unique take on this style of
how many books are there?
So,
it's an actual
20.
Series that he's done a number of these Odd Thomas books. Okay.
Oh yeah. So I'll look it up while you say something.
Well, there's
go ahead. Wit.
There is something really compelling about Yelchin, and this idea that I don't know, there's something weird about this relationship he has with the girl that I I think that's what piques my curiosity. It's like he's like, it's almost like he's a supernatural hunter or something like that. And she like works at an ice cream shop, but she's got the little earbud in and is kind of like his handler almost. I don't really understand their relationship, but it really piques my curiosity. And there's something weird about the vibe in it where it's like they met at one of those little, fortune teller machines that spits out, you are destined to be together forever. And so they're working together. I don't know. All of that stuff strikes me as creating a compelling case to make this interesting story.
Yeah, it really is. He's got his ability is interesting. It's not one that you normally think of, and they sort of alluded to this in the trailer, but didn't really kind of leverage it. So he can see spirits of the dead, right? That's his thing, and he can make himself like be heard to them, but they can't speak to him, and so he can see them, and they can give him signs, but he can't hear them, and so that adds another layer of complication to like how he interacts with these characters. But he has these sort of partner characters, and they, when he points at Elvis Presley in the trailer, he was, up through the first like 3 or 4 of these books, Elvis was constantly with him. And then it kind of, there were some others. Alfred Hitchcock kind of moved in and out. And so, he has these kind of partners. His books, it looks like there are 9 odd books. Or actually, I take that back. There are a couple of prequels, but the official series looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 odd books. And the first one is called Odd Thomas. But they're all Forever Odd, Brother Odd, Odd Hours, Odd Apocalypse, and Deeply Odd.
Gotcha.
Is the most recent one. So, anyhow, I am looking forward to it. I'll see it. I'll plop down some dollars for it in the tunes.
There you go.
Let's talk about our movie.
Ringtone.
Close Encounters of the First Kind. Sighting of an unidentified flying object. Close Encounters of the Second Kind. Physical evidence of a UFO. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Actual contact. A close encounter could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. It does happen to Roy Neary.
Who are you people? We have very little time, Mr. Neary. We need answers from you. They're honest, direct, and to the point.
Who are you
Avez-vous
people?
pas fait récemment une rencontre?
Have you recently had a close encounter?
I want to speak to someone in charge.
Une rencontre plutôt inhabituelle?
I want to lodge a complaint.
A close encounter with something very unusual.
What the hell is going on around here? Who the hell are you people?
It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion.
Wow, this movie. Now, which one did you watch? You watched all 3, I'm sure, you big show.
I did watch all 3.
You did? Seriously? I thought you were joking.
No, I really did. I watched the original cut. I watched the re-release special edition that came out in 1980. And then I watched the director's cut that came out in, was it 98?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Wow. That's serious.
I got a full dose of Close Encounters. I'll tell you something about this, though.
I'm dying to hear.
When you're sleepy and you're watching Close Encounters for the 3rd time and you wake up and it's playing, it's really hard to figure out where it was that you fell asleep because the entire movie is so fresh in your head. It was a real challenge to go, let's see, did I see this scene? I did, but was it this version that I saw it in? And it was,
Yeah.
I drifted a few times. I'll admit it.
So I assume...
This is a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah, no, yes, I buy that. You still like it.
I love it. This is one of those movies that I don't know if I think as I've grown, I think my love for it has grown.
I think so too. Although I have personal problems with it that I didn't have the last time I watched it. It's been a long time since I
I'm
watched
curious.
it.
I'm curious what your personal problems are, because I have personal problems, not with the film itself, but some specific character actions in the film.
Yes.
And I'm very curious. Well, you say it.
Character actions that end up fundamental to the plot that I used to think, oh, that totally makes sense. And now I think that would never, ever happen.
Like what?
Dreyfuss leaves his family.
There are a number of things about parents in this film. And it's funny because Spielberg has come out and said, this was a film that, of all the films that I've made, dates me the most. When I go back and watch it, it's the film that is made from a very specific point in my life, which for him was, I mean, he was young when he made this, and it definitely was a film that was made by a young person who was in that place where I can't remember if he was married at this point in his life, but he was perfectly willing to just up and leave to go with the aliens at that point in his life, which is why he wrote it this way, where he's just like, hell yeah, I'll get on that ship and go see what's up there in space. And
that's the whole point, right? Because that's what I imagine you and I 20 years ago having a very similar conversation. Of course I would do stupid stuff like that. You know, we were living in a dorm.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Anything is better than where we were living.
He was 30 years old when he started shooting this film. So he was in that place where he was perfectly happy to just jump and bail and go experience that. As he's gotten older and he looks back on the film, he's like, there's no way I would ever make that choice. I would never leave my family. I would never tear up my living room and destroy my family and what it means to me by building this giant thing in the living room. He would never go to that place. And I don't think that's what bothers me so much as some of the other character elements. I mean, I think Roy, Richard Dreyfuss's character in this, is really kind of just not that great of a father from the beginning. I mean,
well, and neither is Melinda Dillon as a mother.
And neither is Melinda Dillon.
She's the other one that I have problems with.
They're both horrible.
And Teri Garr is really not a great wife. She's
not.
really not a great spouse.
No support there.
The more that we talk about it, this is not like a marriage therapy movie.
It's not. I mean, there's the most interesting thing that I really enjoyed in the original cut, which is the one that came out in 1977. When we first meet Roy, we have the same beginning where we see everyone, like all these scientists, arriving in this it's like a haboob in the Sonoran Desert in Mexico, which is like this giant dust storm.
There you go.
We get them in Phoenix all the time. It's so much fun in the summer. So they go there, and then we've got the like the air controllers who are dealing with communicating with some pilots who see UFO. And then we come and meet Roy. Or no, then we have Melinda Dillon in the first experience where her son, Barry, basically sees all these toys, sees some aliens, and goes running out in the night, and she chases after. And then we meet Roy at his house. In the original cut, he is playing with his trains, and he's got his little Pinocchio music box kind of spinning around. And it's just him and his train, and he's just kind of in this pensive place. You could tell he's just playing with his toys late at night or something, just trying to figure his life out. I really liked that way to meet Roy. The way that it is in the other two cuts, when we meet Roy, he is he's playing with his trains, but he's helping his son with his homework. Quote unquote helping his son, because he's a useless father when it comes to helping his son.
Yeah, I love that line.
It's just like,
go ahead.
His son is like, hey, I don't understand what these fractions are. I need help with these problems. Look, I went to college, so I don't have to do problems anymore. It's basically what he says.
That's why I graduated, so I never have to do problems anymore.
It's like, wow, way to help your kid out there, buddy.
Well, and B, let me say, I've tried that response, and it doesn't actually work, ever.
Well, and it doesn't work for him. But then he goes into trying to do an example, and it still isn't a helpful example.
It's not, because he just makes the trains crash. And I actually love that sequence, because in the one I looked at was the collector's edition, the most recent. quickly there are thousands of lives in danger. How far does this train have to move before in order to be clear of the oncoming, train thundering down the tracks? And I think that's a clever little bit of comedy. I actually like the family dynamic in there. It feels as bad of a father as he is. That initial sequence feels much more sort of in touch with the chaos of family. That happens, and the sort of diversionary tactics that one uses to try to, just get people to come see Pinocchio. I love the fact that it sets up with him wanting to take the kids to see a movie that is totally fantastical, right? It's a movie, about, about lies, about sort of the nature of truth, in a movie that is about the nature of truth. And I find that I find it a really compelling sort of natural and organic sequence. I like it a lot. I absolutely see what you're talking about, and I think it makes more sense for the character. I think we would buy more of the sort of imprinting that leads to him wanting to give up everything to go into space with these aliens. If we meet him in a little bit more isolationist fashion.
Well, and I mean, it does set up the fact that, okay, this guy is clearly not a family man.
Yeah.
It does help kind of set that. But it just watching that scene after seeing the one in the original cut, I'm just like, and you're right, it does introduce the Pinocchio elements. There's a lot of other stuff that is introduced in that scene that I think is very useful and helpful for the story. But it just makes me like Roy that much less because it's like,
well, and isn't that the devil's choice, right? Because having the extended family scene is better for the movie.
Oh yeah,
but not for the character.
Right. Absolutely.
So.
Yep. Yeah, but you're right. Watching this movie again with kind of older eyes now, it is funny seeing how moments like that, or moments like Melinda Dillon as she's Barry and just kind of watching her kid run off into the night, and she's not like, stop right there, what are you doing? Running out with a flashlight. I mean, she's like lackadaisically going after him. I'm like, your son is running off into the woods in the dark and then into the middle of a road.
And he's, really, I mean, kids are fast. I get that, but they're not that fast. Right? He was just gone.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, did he have some trouble hearing? Like, really? There was, I don't know. That whole really, and the part that really gets me, that sticks for me, is at the very end, kind of the climax of the film, which we'll talk, I'm sure, about at length. But it's that sequence where he's saying, we got to get closer. We got to go down and see this. We got to get closer. And she says, oh, I'm just not ready.
I know. Right. Barry's not here. I can't go down there.
I can't go down there.
It's like, okay, they're the ones who took Barry.
Yeah, right.
But you're not going to go down there.
I didn't. I was not. And I think I'm with you. Like, I like the overall experience of the film, as much, if not better. And I was surprised with how well the film holds up over time. And I'm always alerted to that question: is this film going to hold up? When I see a title card that says present day. I've grown to hate that, to really despise present day, because it immediately dates the film. It's dated about 6 weeks after the film's released. You know what I'm saying? And so I have trouble with that. And still, in spite of the fact that there's still a lot of rotary phones and everything looked really dated. It didn't look present day. Overall, the experience of the film and the experience of the highlight sequences for me really stood up quite well.
I think that's something that always comes with that sort of any story where it does have that present day title card. It is an annoyance that it's in there because it's clearly not present day, and the farther you get from it, the more obvious it is that it's not present day. But I don't know. I guess I just kind of look past those sorts of things. I mean, it is what it is, and you just enjoy it for what it is. And I mean, this film does incredibly hold up as a film from the 70s. And I think, it even holds up as a film today just because of the solid storytelling. But yes, I think that if they could lose that present day title card, it would just be, a little more logical. Like, what is the benefit of having that? It's not like
I don't know.
It's not like it starts in 1947 and then it jumps to present day. That's normally when you would do something like that. So it's the entire film is present day.
Yeah.
So what's the point of that?
I don't know. All right. So this was so you watched the making of stuff, I assume.
Yeah, Spielberg is notoriously somebody who does not want to do commentaries. He wants the film to stand out on its own, but he does some wonderful behind the scenes documentaries and stuff.
So I loved watching it just sort of come together, and that is one of the nice things about this film in particular, because it's not just Spielberg doing the behind the scenes stuff. It's it's the fact that this movie has been so well documented over the last 30 years.
Yeah, and as a film, not just as a film in the process of getting made, but getting made and then getting reworked. My
twice.
Understanding is this is the first time that something like this really happened, where a filmmaker got the opportunity to basically go back, add stuff to their film, rework it a little bit, just a few years later, and basically kind of make a version that he liked better.
Well, talk about that. How did that come about? Because it really, the first one happened, fairly close to the original release, and then the next one was, many years later.
Yeah, the original cut came out in 1977. This was a deal he had made with Columbia. He had come up with this idea way back in the early 1970s. He started toying around with it, and he, I think it was early enough where he ran into Michael and Julia Phillips, the two producers who did The Sting and Taxi Driver. And oddly enough, we now have a Michael and Julia Phillips trilogy that we've talked about
That's
here
too funny.
on the show. But he kind of pitched the show to them, and I think they were working with Columbia on this or something. And after the success of Jaws, they were like, yes, let's do it. And so Columbia started moving forward with this film, and Michael and Julia were the two producers. And it got to a point as they were in production where Columbia started basically going bankrupt and having all these problems. And the head of Columbia at the time came to Steven and said, look, your film has to come out at November, because I'm relying on this film to kind of keep us from having to declare bankruptcy and from the whole company collapsing.
And by the way, it's like $18 million over budget from what you told us.
Right,
when we signed
exactly.
on.
There's way too much money being spent. Yeah. We got to stop. So because Spielberg was like, look, I want to keep doing this. I want to add this whole scene with this ship in the Gobi Desert. And they're like, no. He didn't feel he had time to complete the effects the way he wanted to.
You know what I think they said? No ship for you.
Oh, wow. Very funny.
I'm a dork.
You are a funny guy. So
anyway.
So he released it. So he put it together, released it in 1977 in November, and it did gangbusters. It was hugely successful. And it was one of those where it released just LA and New York initially for the first month, and then it went wide. And it just made just tons of money. It did so well that Spielberg went back, and now Columbia was healthier again, because this film had kind of saved it from bankruptcy. So he said, "Look, I want to go back and I want to fix it and do it the way that I wanted to do it initially." And they said, "Okay, but you got to give a little. There's got to be something that you're giving to us in order to make it worth it. We want to see inside the ship at the end." And Spielberg never really felt, the way he says it is, he never felt that going inside the ship was something that he should have done. He always felt like that was something that should have been kept for the audience's head to kind of picture it how they wanted to picture it. But he said, I made a deal with the devil, and I agreed to do it because I'd get the rest of the money to go back and do all the other stuff that I wanted to do. So he got to re-edit it and rework it and change scenes and reshoot scenes. He got to go do the whole Gobi Desert scene. And then, of course, he had to shoot this whole ending where you see Roy go into the ship and you see him kind of go up inside and you see all the ships landing and you see all of the little aliens through the windows inside the little ship. And so you get that whole ending now. And that was the first thing when Spielberg decided to do the director's cut in 1998. That was the first thing that he excised because he absolutely wanted that out. And so, he got it out and made some other changes in the version that he released as the director's cut in '98. It's interesting how many little changes across the entire film ended up, kind of taking place over the whole thing. And interesting, I don't think the lengths vary that much across the three versions. It's like the first one is 135 minutes. The special edition is actually shorter. It's only 132 minutes, even though it has that extra stuff at the end. And then the director's cut is 137 minutes. So it is the longest of the three versions, but they're all within minutes of each other.
Mm-hmm. So what, we've talked already about the family stuff. Was there anything else between the three versions that you found was just sort of substantively different?
In the special edition, one of the biggest cuts that I felt, I really couldn't figure out why he cut it out, but it was where Roy's family wakes up with Roy kind of freaking out. It's where he's finally just losing it, and he's throwing trees. He's pulling up all the trees and the bushes, and he's throwing dirt through the windows. That whole thing was cut out, and it basically goes from him freaking out in the bathroom to his wife driving away, and the kids are like, "We got to help Daddy. We still got to help Daddy." And I don't know. There's something about it where it sounds to me like,
well, and he's pulling up all the plants, and he's shoveling dirt through the kitchen window,
But they cut all that. They cut all of that in the special edition for 1980.
Oh, because in the collector's edition, it's,
in the director's
some of
cut,
that is back.
All of it is.
All of it is. There wasn't extra digging up in the dirt.
No, it's just it's all there. But in the special edition, he cut all of that, and he cuts in just as his wife is pulling away and leaving him.
Oh, basically. Yeah, no, so, that's lousy.
Yeah, and it's just like, what happened to all that? And then it cuts to him inside, and he's got this giant thing, and I can see why. Okay, there's a big reveal. He's done this giant thing in his living room, but I don't know. They cut a bunch of that out, and I didn't really understand why.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that. Like the way I had read that and because I didn't watch all three movies, I didn't know the extent of that cut. But I had assumed that they left the plants in, but there was more digging, because I thought, how could they possibly get rid of this point right in the middle of the film, which is a little bit of nice comic relief, right? I mean, we see him coming unhinged, and it's sort of subversively sad, but subversively funny because of what he's doing to his home, and especially after that happens immediately after he's saying, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to be okay. And has sort of a coming to his family. And so I thought that bit was actually really well placed.
Yeah,
in the
it
film
is.
Overall. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And it was the strangest cut in the special edition that I really was at a loss for why he did it. And so I was really glad that he put that back in the director's cut.
How about in the big last 43 minutes? That's Spielberg's final symphony, final movement in this film. It's based on it's built largely on a foundation of music and sound, and it's when we not only do we meet the aliens, that's sort of the big climax, but we see the return of the abductees or the abducted, right? And so we see the 1940s airmen, we see, lots of children and families and people from, wearing all sorts of different era of clothes. And they all come out of the ship, and they're kind of just checked off this giant list that said, hey, look, we found them. The aliens had them all along.
That was kind of a weird list to have.
He already has
just in
the
case
tape.
All these missing people.
Like they totally had been preparing for that. That was a really odd sequence. Was there anything in that last section that you felt was changed, that in any way changed, besides Roy going on the ship?
Nothing really changes at that last bit in the end. That really holds true across all three versions. I mean, there's little things like there's a shot of Francois Truffaut that's a little bit longer in the original version. In the special edition, I think really all it was just that whole ending. I don't think anything was added to the or changed or taken out of the special edition from 1980 after that point where he's tearing into the or throwing the stuff through the window. There is actually one scene in the original cut when he first gets to outside Devil's Tower, that little town there.
Mm-hmm.
There is a scene where he tries to get this soldier to let him by. And that's right before he hears Gillian and runs to the train and reunites with Gillian.
Right.
There is a scene where he's trying to get past this soldier. The soldier is played by Carl Weathers. And so it's really strange to me. Oh, Carl, I don't remember Carl Weathers in this film, which is because I had never actually watched the original cut before. And yeah, sure enough, there's Carl Weathers. So that was, I think, one of the only things that... Oh, and also the escape in the helicopter when they get off the helicopter and run, that's a little bit longer in the original cut. I think he smoothed that out a little bit in the director's cut, but really, other than that, there's the last 43 or so minutes of the film is largely unaltered.
Wow.
So it's most of the earlier stuff.
Okay, so that's some detail on the overall film. Talk to me about what this film means to you. Like, where does it fit for you in the genre?
That's interesting. Spielberg is always he said that when he made this film, he didn't call it science fiction, he called it science speculation, because at the time he made this, he firmly believed that we had been visited. And one of the people that he used as a very big reference in writing the script for this and coming up with the story was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, I believe is his name.
Right.
Who had been basically a UFO sighting debunker for Project Blue Book, which was a government program that would basically debunk all these alien stories. Hynek, was helping Spielberg come up with all, the things. And basically what Hynek told him was, look, there is a small percentage of things that I have not been able to debunk. And basically, he said it put him in a place where he felt he couldn't work there anymore. It was, he was feeling there was enough of some stories that he couldn't debunk that he said, I had to quit because there's no way to debunk some of this stuff. And then Project Blue Book, a little bit after that, kind of shut down. And Spielberg was kind of the mindset with Hynek that maybe we had been visited. And, I guess for me, this film is a solid entry. I don't know if I'd call it science speculation. I mean, I just call it a good science fiction film. But I think it's one of the more realistic. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I don't know. It's a funny entry because it's almost less of a science fiction film than it is a conspiracy film, right? Although I remember it as more of a conspiracy film than it is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I remember it as something where Roy was very much alone and not part of the sort of media coverage, and certainly not part of a larger group. I had forgotten, in fact, the initial flyby where he's on the road with all of the other folks in their cars watching this thing. I'd forgotten all of the tracking. One of the strongest sequences, I think, is the aircraft controller sequence. I think is really, really tight. It is really well conceived, and hearing them talk to these pilots and hearing the pilots in that dead space when they're asked if they want to file a report about what they saw when these UFOs buzz them in the air.
Specifically asking, do you want to file a
UFO? Yeah, I thought that was a really great scene. As I said, no, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
I thought that was great. I really did. And so, there is a lot of this film that is about sort of the government reaction to it. And there's this great government meeting where all of the players are sitting around one of those great big long tables, and one of the media personalities, uses the typical line, I've been in the media business a long time, and in all my years doing this, I've never seen gotten a car crash or now that I've done the script, an airplane crash.
Yeah, but never been able to film those happen.
Yeah.
So, right.
Why is it so hard to believe that these things could happen? And since then, of course, we now have so many cameras around that we have lots and lots of footage of all those things. And I think are obviously no closer to believing in the third kind of close encounter.
Well, if anything, we're farther from it because there's just so many cameras out there that reports of UFO sightings. I mean, I guess it has actually diminished because there's just so many cameras out there now.
Yeah. But what I love about this film in that light is that it dabbles in the conspiracy theory and doesn't go down the darker side, right? It doesn't go down, it doesn't leave me with an overwhelmingly negative feeling about the state. Right, and I use heavy air quotes around the state here. It doesn't leave me thinking that there is somebody who's overtly out to hide something that's obvious. I mean, they clearly have put together infrastructure and pro-science and pro-understanding these creatures. And at the end, this was an invitation to Roy by members of this team to join the red suit guys who had been trained and blessed. They had been blessed by a priest to go on this journey into space with these aliens. And I think that is a decidedly 70s vibe, right? I walked away from that feeling, boy, if that's anything that dates this film positively, I felt like that sequence is it. And as Roy is selected, you actually have a member of the science team saying, "I envy you," that sort of playful spirit. I really liked the way the film wraps up in that way, and I think that's the overall feeling about the film that I get that takes me out of the experience of the minute family character issues that I have.
Yeah, it's easy by the time you get to that point to kind of forget and put all the worries about the family stuff behind you and just focus on Roy and this journey that he's going to take, for mankind, I guess you could say. But there is something very invigorating about this story that is filled so positively in a time when, we had Watergate, Vietnam, there's all this stuff. Up to this point, I think most of the alien films that were out there were scary aliens,
right.
Except for maybe like the Day the Earth Stood Still. But for the most part, they weren't like these benevolent, kind creatures that would come down to be our friends. They were more of the scary kind, the giant brain on their head, the laser eyes and stuff like that. And coming at the time in the 70s when this did, it was a very interesting idea to promote this idea of, welcoming that curiosity.
Right. Guess what? They might be peaceful.
Yeah. And I do find that just a really nice story. I think this time I don't think I'd ever noticed like the red vest or the red shirt people as much in previous years when I had watched this. But the fact that they're sitting in their little row in the back watching Truffaut when he's first doing the whole thing with the hand signs, when he's kind of first presenting that, they're kind of in there observing. And they're the ones on the bus, when they start getting ready. And I think I've always kind of glossed over the fact that those guys were the ones that the government is prepping. I still find it odd that Roy and they've captured how many, like about 12 people who have somehow made it to this point. They made it all the way to Devil's Tower, and the government is still not going to let them go to it. It's like the aliens have clearly drawn these people there, and it's just like, I don't know, by that point I'm just like, come on, just let those 12 people go.
What are you talking about the red people?
No, not the red people, but the other people, like the actual people who have finally, followed all the signs to get there. Roy and Gillian and Larry and the old people, everyone who's on that helicopter at the end who's getting sent off.
Who were imprinted.
They were imprinted and they all made it that far.
Yeah.
And the government was just like, well, that's great that you made it that far, but too bad, we're still kicking you out. I don't know. It's just like, God, they're so close. They made it. I mean, what harm is there going to be? I mean, in a film with so much benevolence up to that point.
Yeah, that seemed a little bit heavy-handed. Yeah.
Like, come on. And, it's that thrilling end to get Roy and Gillian there finally, I guess. But it's just one of those little things. But I'm like, and even Truffaut, it's like, they belong here more than we. He knows that they should be there. So.
Huh.
Oh, well.
So having watched all three of these films, and then we'll talk about I want to talk about the effects and the music, but I want to get your opinion of these three. If you have never seen it or you haven't seen it in many years, and you have a choice between the three, but you're not going to watch all three of them, which one would you recommend people watch?
I would just say watch the director's cut. I mean, watching them all, I think it has all of the stuff in it that I like. And I had never seen the original cut until just now, and I was missing the boat. I really like the scene with the giant
where they find the ship,
tanker in the desert. And I mean, I grew up with the seeing Roy go into the ship at the end, from the inside, seeing the inside of the ship. I like not seeing that. And so, I don't know. I like the way that everything is told better in the director's cut. I think Spielberg, by the time he re-put it together that third time, did it in a way where he kept all the good stuff and cut out the stuff that wasn't necessary. And I think that's the strongest of the cuts. So I would just say watch the most recent one.
Excellent. I agree.
As somebody who watched
watched that one. Okay, let's talk about the effects, can we?
Yes. Lots of great effects in this.
Yes. Yes, there were a lot of great effects in this. The effects were done by, what's his name? Douglas
Trumbull.
Douglas Trumbull. It was right there. Right there on the tip of my tongue. Now, Douglas Trumbull, the story that struck me that I thought was really interesting, the story that struck me was Douglas Trumbull also worked on 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand it, they worked really hard to get aliens in 2001, to really have aliens. And one version of the aliens they had actually had only one hole in it. And it was a hole that took in food and pooped out of it and spoke out of it and breathed out of it. It was the uni hole, and it did everything for the alien. And that was one that they were excited about, but seemed like it would gross people out. So they didn't use that one. So they went with lots and lots of versions of aliens, and they never got one that they liked as a team. And so here we come. Douglas Trumbull comes back. They got rid of all the aliens. Now the aliens were just suggestions of intelligence in 2001, which I think in that film actually works much, much better. I think it would have been diminished if we'd seen aliens. Mm-hmm. And now we come to this film, and we actually have aliens. So my question for you, sir, is do you think he nailed aliens?
Well, Douglas Trumbull, he was the visual effects supervisor on this, but he was actually not in charge of the aliens. It was Carlo Rambaldi who did the aliens for the film. But Douglas Trumbull still, as the visual effects supervisor, still worked with Carlo to kind of get him right. I do like what they did with the aliens in the version that we see. I mean, there's three different... I know Spielberg kind of says it's like Earth. There's lots of different varieties of people and life forms. And he says the aliens that come to visit, there's different varieties of aliens. First, you have this long, spindly, spidery-looking one that all I can think of when I see that first one is that's the least welcoming alien, and that's the first one you're going to send out? Are you kidding me?
I know.
Because that one makes me think of that giant, like, dragon ghost thing that comes out of the closet in Poltergeist.
Exactly.
That's all I can think of when I see that one. It's like, that's not the one that you should welcome people with. So there's that one, and then there's all the little tiny ones, of which there's just countless numbers of them. And then there's the last one, which is the kind,
the children.
Alien, after the children. It's the one that the solo one who comes out and does the little hand signs and everything.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I like it. I think I like it because I like the way they chose to shoot it, where essentially they're all backlit, making the features of them harder to see. And there's something about that still leaves something to the imagination, even though I'm getting enough of it to kind of picture what these aliens are. And there's something unique about the way that they're acting that I enjoy. So I do like the aliens. I certainly, in knowing all of the additional footage that they shot of different types of stuff they were going to do with the aliens, I think they made all the right decisions with the film. I don't know if you saw any of the footage of the other stuff they were going to be doing with the aliens, but let's just say they were going down a lot of wrong roads with the aliens.
Well, one of the things I think the benefit of time, we see these so clearly, and the everything's been remastered and it's so gorgeous. And the aliens is one area where I thought, I think it's been remastered too much. Like at the end when that alien smiles in HD, it's like I can see it too clearly, and I wanted more of the bright. What I remember was everything so bright that I couldn't actually really see any of the features of the aliens, and I liked that. That my memory of it was stronger, I think, than the actual appearance of it. But in general, I agree with you, and I like the choices they made. I like that this wasn't a film about the aliens, and yet there was a sort of prominent role for making this transition for the third kind of encounter in a very positive way. And I think the design of the creatures really lends itself to that.
Yeah. And it is one of those things where, that to me, I watch it and I can just tell, those are kids with masks on. That thing is just a really ancient, form of puppetry that really stands out now as clearly 70s stuff. I don't know. I guess I'm so into the movie by that point that even though I can kind of tell that there's problems with these aliens and how they're actually looking, I just move past it pretty well. It doesn't bother me too much.
Okay. Other things that stick out to you in terms of production. Let's talk about the ships. The ships are just fantastic, and just all the designs, the lights. I think it was very smart of them to settle on lights as kind of the defining feature for the ships, because of the way that lights play with a lens and kind of blind it a little bit. So you didn't have to worry so much about what the shape was, what the rest of the ship looked like. You get these lights flashing, and you can tell that something's there. And it plays so well into the theme of or the gestalt of not being able to really make out what you just saw.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of the being a bystander, like it really works well. And then I think the final reveal, like it builds up so nicely to that final reveal where we go from lights dancing in the sky and a whole lot of lens flare to being able to see this essentially this refinery drop from the clouds, over Devil's Tower.
I don't know if I'd say it drops from the clouds. That's one thing that always strikes me about the film is like,
right.
Why does it look like it's coming out of the
rises?
ground?
Yeah. It's a ship rise.
How did that fit back there? Devil's Tower is big, but man, it's not
big.
That big.
Yeah, when you think about the size of that ship, in order to look like that over our horizon, our planet must be the size of like the moon. It must be very small. But in general, I think once we actually see that, I find just the conception of it, I think it works really well, and for me personally, and I think it, in spite of the fact that as you say, the ship rise, and there are some sequences where the ship is taking off, where the scale no longer sort of works. Overall, I just love the effect, and I love the. I think the use of lights is just brilliant. Lights and color is just brilliant.
It's mesmerizing, and that ship has always, in my head, has just become such an iconic sci-fi spaceship.
Yes,
it's always just, I don't know. It's one of my favorites because it's just the design, the lights, the way that it moves, everything about it has always struck me as just there's just so much beauty in it. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Classic. What else?
Well, I guess that's really it. We could talk about the ships, the lights, the effects. I mean, we could literally probably talk about that for hours because there's just so much stuff going on in this film. And all of the people involved, I mean, aside from Douglas Trumbull and Carlo Rambaldi, I mean, Dennis Muren was working on this.
Yeah, Dennis Muren, Ralph McQuarrie.
Yeah, right. Roy Arbogast, a great physical effects guy. I mean, just there's lots of big names. Joe Alves, the production designer, lots of people who are big names in that world and have been for a while. We're all like working on this, and so it's just very exciting to have all of these people together working on this great film.
Absolutely. So where do you want to go from here? You want to talk about music? Or
music,
cinematography,
music cast, cinematography.
All right, I mean
all that stuff.
All right, let's talk about music just briefly.
Yeah. I mean, briefly, just acknowledging the fact that I think it was a very smart decision to tell a story about. This is why I guess I said earlier that this kind of real sense of this story. There's something about the smartness, I think, of telling a story about communicating with another. With aliens, another life form that comes to Earth, because we don't speak the same language, obviously, but finding a way to speak math and using music to speak math. There was something about that has always struck me as one of the most fascinating ways to kind of define science, and not just define science, but tie kind of art and science together in a way that becomes this method of communication. And I have found it such a smart story element in this film. And I think Spielberg and John Williams, who just I think this is one of my favorite scores of his, really, I mean, I know they struggled trying to come up with the 5-note signature key that would be kind of the communication, the main point of communication in the film. But when they hit on it, and when they're able to finally take that, and John Williams was able to kind of elaborate on that, not just in the context of the film as like the communication point when the ship is there, and they're going back and forth with the synthesizer, but also the way that he builds it into the score, and it turns into this operatic, just brilliant piece of music that, I mean, that whole last bit is just truly, I think, one of the great pieces of music that he's ever written.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I don't agree that this is one of his best scores. For me, I find it really an excellent sketch of many of the other scores that he's done that I like better. I don't find it as vibrant and sort of affecting as apart from the final sequence, which I think is more of an example of fantastic sound design than strictly scoring, and I love it. I mean, I love it, and I'm totally into it. But overall, there are elements that I feel like this is more of a diary piece for John Williams for scores that came later that I like much better and are much more affecting for me. I can't listen to this one. I have it, and it's one I put on. I can't listen to it and enjoy it.
Well, and
there's so many others that I can.
To the point to that, I mean, I think it's because the nature of this score is that there is a lot of different. There's two main types of music in this film. There's the atonal stuff that kind of comes when the aliens are first visiting and freaking everybody out, which definitely is harder to listen to. But the way that it, I guess the stuff that I really like, that atonal stuff is harder to listen to, but it's all the stuff that builds on this theme and the way that theme evolves in the film. That's what I really latch on to. And that's why I like it. It's not as, you don't have Star Wars, you don't have 5 different themes that you could hum just out of that film. It's not quite like that type of a score. But for me, I feel that it's a little more of I guess I would say it's more of a mature score is the way that I see it. It's something that really fits in the context of the film really well. And you're right, it may not be something that is easy to sit and listen to on its own. But I think in the context of the film, I think this score is a perfect match for the film for the story that's being told in the film.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that. I just find until the sort of the third act, the meeting of the aliens, there's nothing, there's no theme in there that I remember, I recall. There's no sort of intensity that comes to mind. And yet I hear little snippets of, man, do I hear snippets of Indiana Jones. Man, do I ever hear snippets of Jurassic Park. But anyway, so that's me on John Williams. I don't need to belabor that one. Well, go ahead.
He's one of my J's.
I know he is. He's very much one of your J's.
Yes, he is.
Vilmos Zsigmond.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Vilmos Zsigmond.
I don't know if this was an interesting experience for me watching this film so many times. I mean, the Blu-ray is completely just gorgeous. But I don't know if it's because they shot it anamorphic or what, but I noticed a lot more softness in shots than I had noticed in the past.
Yeah.
And I was just like, gosh, that's weird that there's so much of that going on throughout this film. And I know that there was a lot of stuff they had to do in order to make all the effects shots work. Like they had to shoot everything that was an effects shot. Basically, they had to shoot in 65 millimeter because when they would integrate the two shots or the elements of the real footage of the people with the effects shots, it downgrades the footage. So they'd have to shoot the effects bigger so that when they put all this stuff together and then they brought it back down to 35 millimeter anamorphic, the quality of the effects shots matched the quality of the other stuff. I don't know if that's why some of the shots look worse than others, but some of them aren't effects shots. So I guess it can't always be that. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where I was looking at it, I'm like, gosh,
how did that get by?
Yeah, it strikes me strange that some of these shots are a little fuzzy, and maybe that's why this, he didn't work with Spielberg again after this. Maybe Spielberg was, wondering why so many of the shots were slightly fuzzy too.
Right. Have we done any other Vilmos Zsigmond? Spielberg? Have we done any other films of his? I can't. I mean, because there are other films of his that he's obviously a prolific cinematographer.
And he's been doing this for a while,
long time, and some films that we've talked about doing. We've talked about doing Blowout. Deer Hunter is a favorite of mine. I did that right after Close Encounters. But even leading up to Deliverance, The Long Goodbye, he's prolific work, and yet this film strikes me as. I don't know what it is. It strikes me as so much more Spielberg than Vilmos Zsigmond, right? Like stylistically, like it feels very much like I would align this much more as a Spielberg film than as a film that really has a style of cinematography. This doesn't look like, I couldn't place this next to Maverick and see, similarities to me in terms of stylistic approach.
If anything, this one strikes me as definitely a film of the 70s. There's something about the I don't know, just the feel of it, and maybe it's just the film stock from back then. Maybe that's all it is, but it does seem to me that it has kind of that sort of vibe. And I really like the look. I like the way all of it kind of plays out, but to me it does seem I think you're right. It definitely does feel like there's a little more Spielberg in there than maybe more of that Vilmos Zsigmond look. And maybe it's, I mean, he had been doing this since the 50s, really, 50s and 60s. Maybe he was, still kind of working with some of these people like Robert Altman and stuff, where that a little more of that independent, kind of that 70s vibe going on.
Yeah.
So the director just kind of it really does fall down to the director and what he really wants out of it. So, I mean, he's just doing what Spielberg wants him to, I guess, right?
But, well, he is, but yeah, I think that's it is a testament, I think, to the sort of control of the Spielberg control, because for me this film is not so much 70s as it is, I could look at this, I look next to Empire of the Sun, and I look next to Jurassic Park and Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, and the way they use height in this film, in terms of the way they use these dolly shots and these crane shots to give us this sense of perspective, from looking up, being on the ground, looking up at the sky and looking up at the bodies of the actors as they're moving by, to looking down from, as we're getting this perspective, I think, of the aliens, and moving so adeptly and through the action of a particular sequence, I think is they do really, really well. In particular, these backlighting shots, right? I mean, God, the quintessential shot from this film when Barry opens the door and there's that fiery red light,
right?
Coming through. That is the shot from this film, and it is to me such a Spielberg shot. Like he might as well have been running the camera. It looks to me like I could have just as easily placed it in The Last Crusade or Minority Report. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well,
interestingly, he made this movie again in 2005 with War of the Worlds and did not do anything nearly as interesting.
Well, we'll have to talk about that another day.
Chicken. All right. Who else? Strikes your fancy?
Well, Michael Kahn. This is the first time that Michael Kahn, the editor, has worked with Spielberg. They basically, from that time forward, have created a lifelong partnership. And Michael Kahn has edited every Spielberg film except for E.T. And I'm not quite sure why he didn't edit E.T., but my sneaky suspicion is that it's because I believe Michael Kahn was, I think what happened, there's a whole thing about Poltergeist, and the fact that Spielberg wrote it, produced it, and then Tobe Hooper was directing it. A lot of people say Tobe Hooper wasn't really cutting the mustard, and Spielberg kind of came in and handled the directing. I don't know how much of that is really true, but Michael Kahn was the editor on that. So so instead of doing E.T., I don't know if Spielberg is like, hey, why don't you go edit this one? I think that's the one that I'm having more trouble with. I'd love to have your hand in that because we work so well together. You know what I want. And then he had someone else come on board, E.T. I don't know really what the story is with that, but that's my sneaky suspicion.
Wow, what a soap opera.
I tell you.
Drama.
But Michael Kahn, I think, Spielberg said the last 25 minutes of this film, the hardest bit of film that he's ever had to edit. It was just a real struggle trying to figure out how they were going to make it work. And, I think I can understand why after watching a lot of the different alien footage that they were shooting and everything. I mean, there was just crazy stuff going on. So, but I think the ending works really well. I really like the way they did it. So
the ending holds up a lot of the rest of the film for me. I mean, obviously it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful film. So, but yeah, Michael Kahn, there you go.
Huh. There you go.
Important relationship formed on this film.
You want to talk about the cast?
Yeah. Richard Dreyfuss, I think, is great as Roy in this film. I think Spielberg initially was talking to people like Steve McQueen, Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Gene Hackman. Richard Dreyfuss, who we talked about on Jaws, kept bugging Spielberg, saying, "You need to cast me. You need to cast me." And Spielberg's like, "Yeah, you're not quite right." And this was when they're on Jaws, and he could only see him as Hooper at that point. And then finally, Richard Dreyfuss said, "You need to cast somebody who is more like a child, who's closer to their childhood than they are their adulthood." And when he said that, it triggered something in Spielberg, who acknowledged him as, "That's exactly right. You're the guy to do it." And that's what triggered him to cast Richard Dreyfuss. And I think Richard Dreyfuss is perfect as this guy who is not meant to be a father, not meant to be a family man. He's meant to be somebody who's supposed to go off on a spaceship.
I think the comparison of Roy Neary to Hooper is actually quite apt. And I think it's funny that Steven Spielberg didn't actually see that and talk specifically about how he didn't see that until that moment that you talk about, that conversation. The idea that I see those same characteristics, that same sort of eagerness to explore and to be in that sort of childlike awe. That's Hooper's character as a scientist, as an oceanographer, as somebody who comes in to study. He is so excited about the idea of this shark in a really giddy, youthful way, just as he is excited about the idea of what's out there and learning what's out there. I have to see if this is really happening.
But I don't think he's excited and giddy in this film. I think, if anything, Hooper fits more with the Lacombe character, Francois Truffaut's character. He's the one who kind of has that childish excitement about something big is happening, and I get to be kind of the guy who's going to be behind the whole discovery.
We don't ever see Francois Truffaut playing with mud.
Well, that's true. That is true. But man, does he look like the perfect guy who I want to be like my uncle or something.
I totally agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. Okay. He's great. I have a problem with Melinda Dillon.
I love Melinda Dillon. I don't have a problem with her in this. I just have a problem with the character.
Yeah. Well, either way, I find her totally underwhelming. She earned an Oscar nomination for her performance in this film, and I find her totally underwhelming. And the whole time I'm thinking, man, they should have swapped her and Teri Garr. I find Teri Garr's. I think that was just a mix-up. It's like it was an accident on the first day of shooting, and they showed up in the wrong shoes. That's
really funny because when Teri Garr read the script, Spielberg said, "I want to offer you the part of Ronnie," and she's like, "Oh no, I need to be Gillian." Spielberg is just like, "No, I want you to be the housewife. I see you as kind of the typical housewife, and that's what I want you to be." And so that's what she ended up getting cast as. So it's funny that Teri Garr wanted to be that other role.
Teri Garr and me, and I think Spielberg was wrong. He was totally wrong on this one.
Yeah, the role of the housewife is really a thankless role in this film. I mean, it's she's not a sympathetic housewife. She, granted, he's a terrible father and husband, but at the same time, there's nothing. She shows no. She tries. She just never quite gets there. I actually really love the moment, and I always forget about it. But the moment when he drags his family out in the middle of the night to go wait for this encounter.
Right.
And there's that great moment between the two of them where she's just, walking around and, asking him all these questions. What's it look like? What color is it? And she's like, "Don't you think I'm handling this really well?" Because it's like 4 a.m. and he drags them out to go look for aliens. And she's like, "I remember when we used to come to places like this to look at each other." There's something so honest and I just so sweet about that moment between the two of them, and then they kind of kiss, and then the kind of the funny tag at the end of that as he kind of opens his eyes and looks back up to the sky as they're kissing. That's a cute moment, but I really like that moment between this couple. I kind of wish there was a little more of that, just to kind of make me like her a little more, maybe. But I also understand from Spielberg's perspective, if you put too much in, nobody's going to like Roy.
Yeah.
And that's the danger.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Their big fight.
Yeah.
It's just it's exhausting.
Yeah. Especially because the kids are involved. That's what always makes it hard for me.
Yeah, it is. But
It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough just to watch how they relate to the kids and how much of the kid. I mean, how human that relation is. You know, when you just see all their buttons getting pushed. You know those buttons. Okay, so Francois Truffaut, Teri Garr, Melinda Dillon, Richard Dreyfuss. Anybody else jump out at you? You want to talk about?
The only other one, I mean, it's Bob Balaban. I mean, the cast is just fantastic in this. But somebody and Carrie Guffey as the little 3-year-old Barry. I love him. And oddly, Lance Henriksen as kind of like guy in the back all the time. Which cracks me up. It's just like that's the weirdest role for Lance Henriksen, but there he is. But the one that stands out that no one ever talks about, but he stands out every time I watch it, is Roberts Blossom playing the kind of freako alien guy who's sitting on the hill playing his harmonica or whatever he's doing.
Yes.
And, he's
I saw
kind of
Bigfoot once.
Yeah, he's great in this. And he's like the perfect guy that you don't want to be on your side when you see an alien. And so he's so great in that role. And I didn't even realize it until later, but he was the old guy in Home Alone. He's the the guy,
the old scary neighbor.
Yeah, right. Who Kevin befriends.
Yep.
And I didn't recognize him right away, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's the old man Marley. So
that's awesome.
A little bit, yeah.
We've been talking about this movie for a long time.
No,
I think we could talk about it for much longer.
Could.
What are your final things? Do you have final things?
I have pages of final things. I think what I would just say is this is just an absolutely fantastic movie. I really love it, and it's a film that is worth spending time with. How's that?
That was pretty good. You didn't even give me a chance to drink.
Yeah, I will say. Can I just tell you a little obsession that I had?
Oh, you know how I live for these.
I was really curious because I was plugging the numbers in, as I do every week, trying to see how this movie did in relation to all of our other movies. This movie did really well for itself. It came out in 1977. Now, granted, the numbers for this do have some of the re-release profits figured into it.
Yeah.
But even with that, I don't think it would have really changed it that much. This movie jumped all the way up to, when you figure adjusted profit and adjusted profit per finished minute in particular, this has become the number 2 film on our list. Just behind Jaws, just before Raiders of the Lost Ark. So Spielberg now, on our list of films that we've talked about, holds the top 3 spots when you adjust for inflation. If you don't adjust for inflation, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is still number 1. Jaws, Raiders, Temple of Doom, Closing, and then you've got Bourne Ultimatum in 7, and then Close Encounters is number 7.
If you don't adjust for inflation, he's the top 4?
He's the top 4, and then he's also 7 and 8. Close Encounters and Last Crusade. So of the top 10 films, not adjusted. But of course, once you adjust it, it still is Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders, Temple of Doom, Crystal Skull, Last Crusade. They're all still in the top 10. So this piqued my curiosity, and I decided, I wonder, I should do this for all of Spielberg's films. And so I created a new tab on our movie cost per minute breakdown. I put in all 27 of Steven Spielberg's films, that his full theatrical films. So Duel is not on here. Twilight Zone, the movie, is not on here. But everything that is a full theatrical film, they're all on here. So his 2 top grossing films, when you look at profit per finished minute, or just profit, period, are E.T. and Jaws. Those 2 are like neck and neck as far as how profitable those 2 are.
Okay.
When adjusted. Below that is Jurassic Park.
Okay.
And then Close Encounters.
All right.
The Lost World, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, War of the Worlds, and then Last Crusade. Those are his top 10.
How did Crystal Skull make that much?
I don't know. That one just.
Nerds. You carry shame, nerds.
So of his 27 films, do you think that he's made a film that has lost money?
That has lost money. I want to say no, but I have a feeling you're going to trick me.
Because he did make one that lost money.
What?
It is Empire of the Sun.
No way.
That film, it cost $35 million to make, and then it only grossed a total of $22.2 million.
Wow, that makes me sad.
I know. It's a fantastic film. It certainly deserves a better reception than it got. But everything else, even if it made very little money, like Amistad or Sugarland Express, Munich Warhorse, Always, those all still ended up making little bits of money.
Well, and so here we are. So I just brought up your tab too. And you can find this tab if you go to the website and click on the extras menu. You can jump to the cost per minute breakdown. You'll find the Steven Spielberg cost per minute. And I just opened it up. And I mean, you say, oh, they made a little bit of money, but, Munich made $45 million.
Yeah, right. I mean, they still made a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really just like it looks like
it's
Amistad and Sugarland Express.
You compare it to E.T. that made $1.8 billion.
Right, exactly. That's the difference. That is the difference.
Wow.
Yeah, he's an interesting director who holds a lot of weight. If you go through the release dates of all of his movies, every one of them was either released in May, June, or July. So he's got like the peak summer months, or November, December. In fact, December, I should say, except for Close Encounters, which was November. The only one that falls outside of that is his first film, Sugarland Express, which was a March release. So he's definitely somebody who is tapped into the market and has the ability to say, I want my films released either summer or award season.
Wow. That's a lot of juice.
Yep.
I think we should probably rank it.
Let's do it.
If you head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, you will find our stack rankings of all of the films that we've talked about to date. And you can see, you can friend us over there and see how our films line up with your own ratings. What do we think?
Let's do it. We got Close Encounters or Gattaca. It's totally Close Encounters.
Yeah, that's Close Encounters.
Close Encounters or Fargo?
Oh, Close Encounters.
Close Encounters or All the President's Men?
All the President's Men. I know.
That's a really hard one.
I do love me some Awesome President's Men.
I know you do. I know.
I think I just said all some presidents.
Also,
there's some presidents and they have men.
All
definitely, it's a different.
Man.
It's a different genre.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It might be Close Encounters for me.
Think of it. I never drift during Awesome President's Men.
I'll go All the President's Men, even though I drifted in Close Encounters, but it was the third time that I watched it in a row.
In 3 days.
It was completely justified, but because of that, I still will go All the President's Men. Just for you, buddy. Close Encounters or About a Boy. It's got to be Close Encounters.
Close Encounters, yeah.
Close Encounters or The World's End. I would still go Close Encounters, but, give it 20 years.
Yeah, all right. Close Encounters.
Close Encounters or Being There?
I'm going to go Close Encounters.
Yeah, I'm still Close Encounters. All right. There we have it. Number 16 out of 118.
I'm a little surprised that didn't crack the top 10.
Well, we've got some re-ranking to do. There's some films in our top 10 that I think shouldn't
Right.
be. So
we should
I
probably
think
re-rank our top 10.
we need to
At a bare minimum, we should re-rank our top 10.
Yeah, we
right.
got some to do. Oh, last thing that I want to say about this. In college, in my biology class, something when you have a film titled something like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it's ripe for spoof titles, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yes.
I have never gotten out of my head that the biology teacher I had in college had us watch a documentary about plant life and how plants, I don't want to say mated, but how they get their pollen from one plant to the other, luring insects to do it. And so they had this documentary made called Sexual Encounters of the Floral Kind. I'm not kidding. It was a documentary that we watched. And I actually found you can watch it in like little 7 to 10 minute chunks on YouTube. So we'll throw a link to one of those in the show notes.
I think that, and we're actually going to do a whole show on it coming up in the rest of the year.
Pleasure.
It's fantastic, Andrew. Where do we go from here?
Well, we're going to continue our original sci-fi series, and we're going to go to James Cameron's fantastic undersea adventure, The Abyss.
You're watching
the aliens.
Are you watching the director's cut of this one?
Yes, I am.
All right. So you're not going to watch like the original theatrical like dailies.
I think for this one, I'm good watching one. I did it for Close Encounters. I think I'm okay.
I think you're okay.
Not doing it for The Abyss.
All right. Well, I can't wait. I'll talk to you next week. Until then, I got to go to bed. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies.
And some stinkers.
Well, true. But producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
In Season 3, we covered even more great adaptations like The Night of the Hunter and It Happened One Night, both part of our Couples on the Run series.
We talked about No Country for Old Men. The Coen brothers so rarely adapt someone else's work.
We had some fun rom-com adaptations like About a Boy, based on the Nick Hornby novel, and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, adapted from Rachel Cohn and David Levithan's book.
In our terribly and naively named foreign language series, we discussed The Brilliant City of God and The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which I won't ever be able to watch again, ever.
But could you read the original memoir?
I don't know, maybe?
We had our Richard Dysart series with adaptations like The Day of the Locust and Being There.
Plus, we had that fantastic interview with the man himself.
The one where we had him sit on the floor?
Because this chair was so squeaky. Good times.
We did our first Tom Hanks series with Forrest Gump, adapted from Winston Groom's novel, plus Apollo 13, based on Lost Moon by Jim Lovell.
And we did another year series looking at films from 1981, including Das Boot, Gallipoli, and Thief, all based on books.
Listeners can dive deeper into all of these original stories and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every book, play,
movie,
video game. You bet. We have talked about some video game adaptations as well. It doesn't matter the source, just follow the link. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Check out the full list at thenextreel.com/originals and get reading, watching, performing, or playing today.